Hi, my name is Denise Bai, and I'm a board certified advanced holistic nurse holding several certifications. And part of my background is that I was a neuro and trauma ICU nurse for many, many years. And one of the things that we've always seen when it comes to traumatic brain injuries or anything neurological is that there are several waves, brain waves that we have. And in order to be able to manipulate those to decrease different symptoms that people come in with after a traumatic brain injury, after concussions, after huge emotional and traumatic stresses in their life, they all end up looking the same when it comes to brain waves. So the question is, how do we actually help with all of these things and the symptoms that it can cause? The symptoms can range from one person to the next. You can see things like ADD and ADHD to insomnia, to things like Lyme disease, to all sorts of traumatic brain injuries and stroke. I mean, there's a huge spectrum. So, what is the underlying cause? What is the root cause? I am a root cause practitioner, and that's what I truly focus on is finding the root cause of what is causing you or your loved one the issue or distress. Many of the root causes that we see with a lot of the symptoms that people are expressing these days with the disease processes that keep on increasing are neuroinflammatory responses. There's neurological dysregulation. Now, what causes that? There are a plethora of causes. If you want to go down the Google rabbit hole, you can find just about anything can be a cause of neurodysregulation. So things like traumatic injuries. We now have a lot of research on things like CTE for football players that cause all of this neuroinflammation, which will end up resulting in neurodegeneration. So these are things that we want to obviously stop from happening. How do we, if we are predisposed to something like a car accident, a traumatic event that happens with something as simple as whiplash, a concussion, several concussions? What if you don't have a concussion, but you actually have some bruising on the brain that will elicit the same cascade or inflammatory response within the brain? Now, one of the things that happens is that it affects these delta waves. The same can be said with any large emotional stress or trauma. So this can be things with a history such as sexual, emotional, physical, or mental violence and abuse. We see that a lot. What are some common symptoms that people will have? Many people complain of insomnia. Insomnia is the inability, I should say, of not being able to sleep well, or if you fall asleep well, not being able to stay asleep or get the proper amount of sleep in a night that you should be having. If this sounds like you or someone you know, one of the overarching root cause issues that we see is neuroinflammation. Now, there's several ways to combat anything that would cause neuroinflammation. We want to find what the root cause is for you, and that will look different for each person. But one thing that all of them have in common are these delta waves. Now, what are these delta waves? Delta waves, you have several neurological waves. These delta waves specifically, I liken to static on your radio channel. If you're scrolling through the radio and you're starting to get a little bit of static where you can still hear the music in the background, that would be likened to these delta waves being neurologically impaired, or the beginning of a neurological impairment within the brain. You start hearing just a little bit of static. Now, what does that look like? That can range in symptoms of people feeling a little bit of paranoia every so often, slight amounts of anxiety that still allow them to be functional, but that are starting to creep in when they didn't have that before. This can be things like that with children, especially, and adults diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. It's an inability to organize thoughts or even actions based off of this neuroinflammation or some different root cause issues that are causing those responses within that person. So the symptoms can range greatly. They can range from things like stroke, inability for speech, and lots of speech issues, a lot of hearing issues, sensory issues. We see a lot of those types of things. Now, what if these delta waves are not fixed in a prompt amount of time? What happens? Well, just like anything else, further away that you get from any type of radio antenna, or the more damage that it is, the more static you're going to get and you're going to hear, to the point where there can be all static and no radio station. Now, who are these types of patients? These types of patients we see in those that have extreme PTSD, where they are no longer able to be functional. This can look like severe depression, panic attacks, agoraphobias, any type of phobias, OCD. All of these types of things have those common factors of having these delta waves that do not allow them to be and live a happy, healthy life because they cause neuroinflammation. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is the difference between this and biofeedback or just neurofeedback? It is hugely different. Traditional neurofeedback does not use electrical stimulation. It usually works through operant conditioning, and the goal is really to teach the person to increase or decrease specific brain waves. Many clinicians really work towards increasing what we refer to as alpha waves within the brain. Some do alpha and or theta training. It requires effort on the part of the client to really learn how to do this, and typically takes around 20 to 60 sessions, depending on which studies you tend to review. The science is very clear when it comes to this with neurofeedback. It works for many people. However, the cost and the time involved is normally extremely significant, and that alone can be a barrier. And maybe that's been a barrier for you. Transcutaneous electrical stimulation by means of microcurrent neurofeedback, which is what this is a low intensity pulse-based transcranial electrical stimulation. There is no effort required on the part of the client, and it generally requires fewer sessions, and the cost is also typically less. This has also made a huge difference very quickly in the lives of countless people, and we normally see symptoms ranging from those diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, anxiety, autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, epilepsy, fibromyalgia, headaches, insomnia, migraines, Lyme disease, memory disorders, cognitive disorders, psychological disorders and mental health issues, PTSD, stroke, traumatic brain injury, and these are just a few. People with OCD can't be taken off this list either. What these all have in common is a nervous system that is dysregulated for one reason or another. As a root cause practitioner, it is my goal to get to the true root cause of what is causing your nervous system dysregulation, or that of your child, your family, or friend that you refer. This means that there may be additional support, not only in the form of microcurrent neurofeedback that's needed, but also in the form of things like nutritionals and herbals or lifestyle changes that are going to actually be able to bring down some of this brain inflammation and neuroinflammation to help lighten and dampen those delta waves. For more information on delta waves, there are plenty of studies, and I'm sure you can go down a fabulous Google rabbit hole with what delta waves actually do. And what they're responsible for is that they do have a time and a place. And one of the things that we don't want them to do is to cause too much static within the brain. One of my personal experiences is with one of my sons who almost died at around right over 3 years old. He is a twin, an identical twin, and had a grand mal seizure out of nowhere. No precipitating factors, no trauma, no infection, literally no history. From there, almost died, blood sugar of 13. So if that means anything to you, he really should have died a long time before we even caught it. And one of the things that along with hypoxia, with being out for so long, caused within his brain was delta wave and sympathetic nervous response over accumulation. So what happens when we have these things like anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, headaches, PTSD, ADD, and even ADHD, OCD, all of these overarching medical diagnoses? Well, the common factor is that we see these delta waves become part of the static. They become part of that noise. And the more you are in this sympathetic fight or flight response, the more the delta dysregulation actually is. So what do we do with microcurrent neurofeedback through transcranial electrical stimulation? A, it does not hurt. You will not feel a thing. It is microcurrent neurofeedback. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. It is friendly to all ages and conditions. So like I said, I work on my own children. I work with pediatric population as well as geriatric and anything in between. I work with those who have Alzheimer's and cognitive impairments, those who suffer from chronic fatigue or chronic pain syndromes as well. So it's a vast array. What's what we're truly working on? We are working on stopping that dysregulation on a brainwave physiological level within the central nervous system to quiet those delta waves down so that we can hear the music in the back. Well, what's the music in the background? That's you and your thoughts. That's not having brain fog anymore. That's being able to actually follow through on one thought and follow it to the end, not be so squirrel, which is what we see with ADD and ADHD. It's just we have so many tabs open at the same time. We also see this in males and females that are chronically stressed, right? Because that puts us into our sympathetic nervous response as well. And that ends up accumulating through these delta waves, along with many other physiological places that it can also end up, which is why we always say that it's best to do MCN with some sort of supplementation, such as bioenergetic testing and being on a very precise protocol for you, made for you specifically. So this can be with a bioresonance practitioner, MD, ND, that we actually have on staff as well, and would be amazing for you to get that full rounded experience. What we have seen here is that we are creating faster, more reasonable results with mixing bioresonance testing, that physiological support, working on those root cause symptoms, as well as microcurrent neurofeedback with our clients. It's providing people just tarmac to just truly take off in transformative health and root cause health. So if this is something that is near and dear to you, something that you're struggling with, or you know someone who's struggling with, we would absolutely love to hear about them and work together to make sure that we're not only providing you with nervous system dysregulation on a delta wave level, but we're actually providing you whole body, whole mind support. And as a board certified advanced holistic nurse, that is my mission statement to everyone, is to provide everyone with holistic and being a whole, not breaking you up into pieces and only working on one thing at a time, because we are only as good as the sum of our parts. And if there's a part that's not working, such as the brain, which is our command center to every other bodily influence in our body, then that's probably where we need to start first. If this is something that you would like to know more information about, feel free to reach out to the practitioner or the person that referred you to us, and we would love to hear and see how we can work with you and create better nervous system regulation.